Okay, so I decided to do my final presentation over megacities, and I thought they were really interesting to learn about and to know a little bit more about them and what they really are. So to start off with, what is it? It's basically a very urban, populated area that has slowly become more and more populated because people just keep acclimating there from the countrysides of these countries that have started their urbanization process. Oftentimes, they're the most heavily populated areas in the world, and I have a little video explaining a little bit about what a megacity is.
About a week. So now I'm going to show you how I use Grammarly to edit.
In 1950, New York and Tokyo were the only so-called megacities, cities with more than 10 million inhabitants. By 1980, these were joined by Mexico City, Sao Paulo, and Osaka. In 2010, there were over 20 megacities spanning almost every continent. Today, there are 32 megacities. Urbanization is happening faster than at any time in human history. Asia accounts for over half of today's megacities. By 2030, nearly 9% of the world's population will live in 41 megacities. But it's in Africa where some of the most rapid urbanization will take place in the future.
So with that video, it explains a little bit about really what a megacity is and how it's affected the world. And in that way, obviously you can see over the years, there has been tons and tons of urban population throughout Latin America and different areas of the world. So the reason I chose this project in particular is because I wanted to learn about the population and the living conditions in these areas, because as you can probably guess, the living conditions are probably not the best area aspect of what these countries have to offer. So population and living conditions being my two reasons for doing this, and basically my whole project and what I learned about. I chose 3 different big populated megacities. And so my first one is going to be Mexico City. And much of the population in Mexico City is because of the urbanization and people migrating into it. And it has gradually become more of an urbanized area. Much of the housing that they have in Mexico City is very low income. Not a lot of people have a lot of money, so they live in a lot of places, especially in Latin America, called favelas. And basically what they've done in Mexico City is just kept building and building and building on top of each other, so creating really high-rise buildings, and a lot of these buildings are already not a great condition and definitely not the most cleanliest places in the world. Population growth since 1910 has definitely become a very rapid increase in Mexico City, and because a lot of their housing is low income, it just keeps growing. And like I said before, you just keep building and building on top of things. And if you look through my charts and my graphs, you can just see the rapid scale that goes up and up with it. So the next part that I obviously talked about was what their population rates were. So the numbers have grown tremendously over the past decades. In 1950, there was only about 3.1 million people in Mexico City, which is still a gigantic number. Went to 1960, and there was 5.5 million people. 1980, it grew to 14 million, so that was a really big jump in 20 years. And today there's over 20 million people living in Mexico City, with the streets very crowded and very full. The next city I really wanted to learn about was Sao Paulo, and the fun fact is it's the 10th most expensive city in the world. We see it as that, but people who live in the low income housing and who don't have a lot of money that live there, they see it as just being a very populated, urbanized area. Next, the slums and the drug dens, that's what Sao Paulo is known for. And about 30% of these people live in these drug dens and slums. And that's about 30 million people out of the population, because there's 30 million people, or 30% living in these. 12.3 million people in Sao Paulo about today, and again, they live in favelas, and a lot of their population lives on the street, and about 19% are living on the street, which is an outrageous number for people just to be hanging out. And again, in Sao Paulo, they just keep building and building on top of the favelas till they just start to fall down, and then they just rebuild them, is basically what I learned and grasped from this. The next city I chose was Buenos Aires, and the city population is really on a rapid growth path. Their city streets are completely packed. You cannot walk there. I watched a video on this, and I actually have the video to show you guys. It's known as one of the most beautiful cities in Latin America, but that is if you are of the wealthy population. So here's the video on Buenos Aires.
You booked a sunny Verbo ski chalet with endless views of snow-covered peaks.
Here in Buenos Aires, making a life-size city is, of course, about projects like building parks, tearing down an urban highway, and creating affordable housing. But it's also about the small stuff, like making sidewalks just a little bit wider.
This is changing the city live. You can see how this is being taken from cars.
Yeah.
These are some of the interventions that the city has been doing the last few years, and just standing here for a few seconds, you can see how the pedestrians, they start using it.
But yeah, this is like unused space by cars, and now they're taking it back.
You have the parking racks. Over here you have a cafe, so you have the flower pots that's creating this distance to the cars. Like, you just create a pop-up space where you can enjoy outdoors. And this is definitely like the way of reclaiming space from the cars.
Is this everywhere around the city, or is it here in the little bit gentrified, kind of cool neighborhood?
A lot of people feel that the interventions are being made in places where it's like, well, of course it's going to work there. It's full of hipsters and tourists, and that's the typical criticism also with Palermo and the cyclists. That's the typical, hey, you only do it there. But actually, you have to give the city credit. They're making these in different neighborhoods. They're trying out with a lot of pedestrian density, more residential neighborhoods, and kind of finding out, hey, this actually works anywhere. Of course, this is temporary, and that's the big pressure is accompanying this and saying, hey, this is what we want. We should expand this. We should make it permanent.
The city has many, many plans. The pedestrianization of some 100.
So that gives you a little bit of view on what that city's like and what's happening there, basically. A lot of it is just completely because of urbanization. So a really common thing in Buenos Aires is abandoned buildings that are just toppled on top of each other, and a lot of them like have people living in them, but they're all abandoned pretty much. In today, for the population of Buenos Aires, there's about 15 million people living there, and a lot of it is in low-income housing again. They just don't have enough money to build houses or to get out and get something better to live in. And then here are my sources and my picture sources. Thank you.